Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When ex-military cop Logan Carroll bought 5 acres of Idaho land for peace, he didn't expect war with a suburban tyrant. But when the HOA queen pin crossed his fence line, literally, she triggered a battle of wits, wire cutters, and the iron will of a man who doesn't back down. I bought the place for peace. 5 acres of dry, pine-dotted land just outside Boise city limits, enough to stretch, breathe, and build the kind of fortress every former military cop dreams of owning once he's had enough of barking orders and bureaucrats. The lot had once been part of an old ranch, grandfathered into zoning law before any of the surrounding communities existed, including the one that sat just a quarter-mile away, Aspen Hollow, a pristine HOA suburb full of matching mailboxes, chemically green lawns, and people named Bryce and Tiffany who wore fleece in 80-degree weather. I wasn't part of them, legally, geographically, spiritually, which made it all the more amusing when 3 days after installing my perimeter fence, I got my first love letter from their queen bee. It was a folded sheet of paper stuck in my mailbox. No stamp, no envelope. I opened it while sipping black coffee on the front porch, still smelling like fence paint and electrical solder. The note was typed, centered, and bold. Zoning violation. Your fence exceeds the height limit set by HOA Ordinance 4.2a. Please remove it by Friday to avoid sanctions. I laughed out loud. Not a chuckle. A full honest belly laugh. My fence was 6 feet of solid powder-coated steel with vertical bars and spike tops. Industrial grade. Gate operated by RFID, backup battery in a weatherproof housing, mounted cameras at all 4 corners. Every bolt installed with my own hands. I'd filed the permit with Ada County 6 weeks prior, got it approved, inspected, and signed off by a man who'd looked like he hadn't cared what I did as long as he could eat lunch by 11. I tossed the letter on the grill and let it burn with the rest of the scrap wood. Someone from Aspen Hollow was clearly confused, or bored, or both. The next morning, I was under the front gate housing, wiring the final junction box for the camera relay, when I heard the sound of cheap heels crunching gravel. I stood and turned. There she was, 60-something, dyed blonde bob, crisp linen blouse, clippered in hand, lips pursed so tight you'd think she'd been sucking lemons since Reagan. Karen D'Angelo, she said, not offering a hand. President of Aspen Hollow Homeowners Association, I nodded. Logan Carroll. Owner of this land, also not a member. I'm well aware. That doesn't mean your property isn't subject to the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. You're highly visible from the east cul-de-sac. I arched a brow. Didn't realize aesthetics were contagious. She didn't laugh. You'll need to remove the fence. HOA guidelines prohibit any fencing over 42 inches, and black steel is considered aggressive visual clutter. I pulled a folder from the passenger seat of my truck and handed it to her. County permit, survey plot, zoning exemption. All filed and legal. She flipped through the pages like they personally offended her. Well, HOA regulations supersede. No, they don't. Not here. This parcel was subdivided in 1964. Never annexed, never joined. I'm not bound to your HOA. She tried another tactic. Then at least provide us with a spare key or gate code. We need access for safety inspections, fire lanes, and such. You'll get neither. No one enters unless I invite them. Her mouth opened and closed like a trout on deck. That's highly irregular. Lady, this is a private ranch lot in a free state. Irregular is the default. She spun on her heel and walked away, fast and stiff, like her shoes were too tight. I watched her disappear down the trail that connected to her neighborhood. Then I walked back to my gate, ran the final test on the automation relay, and watched the system click to life. Cameras rotated, lock engaged. Whatever she thought this was, she was in for a surprise. Because I'd built this fence not just to mark territory, but to draw a line no one was going to cross. The thing about ex-military work is, it hardwires you to respond to alarms before you even finish blinking. So, when the security alert from my gate pinged my phone at 6:15 the next morning, I was already halfway into my boots before I registered the details. Incident detected. Front perimeter gate. Camera 3 activated. Motion trigger. I checked the feed as I grabbed my jacket. The live footage showed nothing. Just my front gate, shut tight like it had been all night, with a squirrel darting across the gravel shoulder. Weird. Maybe a sensor misread. I reset the alert and went outside to give the setup a quick once-over, just in case something had shifted. That's when I heard the sirens. They weren't distant. They were screaming down my gravel access lane like I'd set off a flare. Within seconds, 2 black and white cruisers from Ada County Sheriff's Office kicked up clouds of dust, flashing reds and blues before screeching to a halt just outside my locked gate. I stood still, both hands visible, still holding my damn coffee mug. One officer exited fast, hand hovering near his sidearm. The other took a beat longer, clearly reading from a mobile screen before looking up. "You Logan Carroll?" "Yep, owner and resident." "We received a 911 call reporting a man illegally barricading a public access road and brandishing a firearm. You're currently armed." I held up my free hand. "Only with this." I took a sip. Black. "No sugar." The first officer exhaled, visibly relaxing. The second one glanced over at the fence, then back at me. "Can we take a look around?" "You can inspect anything from your side of the fence," I said, motioning toward the cameras. "And I can show you the paperwork right now." I fetched the binder from the cab of my truck, same one I'd handed that woman the day before. County permits, zoning map, and a letter from the registrar confirming I was not subject to HOA jurisdiction. They read through it, flipping slowly. "Who called this in?" I asked, already knowing. The radio on the cruiser squawked. Dispatch confirmed the caller, Karen D'Angelo. Claimed I had barricaded a historic utility path and was visibly armed, detaining possible trespassers. I looked at the fence, then back at the officers. "You see any hostages back there? Maybe duct taped to a cactus." They didn't laugh, but I saw the edge of a grin crack one of their faces. "Mr. Carroll, you're in the clear. No violation here, but we'll have to file this visit and the complaint." "Appreciate it," I said. "While you're at it, you might want to note this as a potential misuse of emergency services." The first officer gave a nod. "It'll be logged." As if summoned by the sound of her own name, Karen appeared at the end of the trail, walking with the righteous fury of someone who's never once considered the possibility they could be wrong. She marched right up to the gate, only stopping when she realized she was on camera. Again. "I told you," she snapped at the officers. "This fence is obstructing the community's access to the trailhead, and he's threatening people. The neighborhood is afraid." "Ma'am," the lead officer said carefully, "this is a private lot. It's been such for over 50 years, and we've confirmed the property owner is not part of your HOA." She was already shaking her head. "But we see it. From the street. It's a steel monstrosity." "Ma'am," the officer repeated, firmer now, "that is not a crime. We're going to formally warn you. False reporting to 911 is a criminal offense." "Don't let this happen again." Karen's face turned a shade of red I'd only ever seen on a smoker's lungs. "You're siding with him? He's dangerous. He's got security cameras. What kind of person surveils their own yard?" "Ma'am," I said dryly, "the kind who's been through Fallujah and isn't keen on HOA drama queens with bolt cutters." The officers barely kept a straight face. Karen stormed off again, hissing something about county board complaints and legal action. I turned back to the gate, watching the cruisers reverse down the gravel. I made a mental note to add a second floodlight over the main entrance, maybe some passive infrared sensors along the perimeter. Not because I was paranoid, because now I knew what kind of crazy I was dealing with. She'd called the police, lied to emergency services, all because she couldn't handle being told no. And I had the distinct feeling she was just getting warmed up. The message hit my phone just after midnight. "Gate system fault. Power disruption. Access offline." That alone was enough to get me moving. But what really got my attention was the second alert. The camera feed from Zone 4 had gone live. Motion triggered. I tapped in fast. The screen showed a shadow hunched low by the side utility conduit, right near the junction box that fed the front gate's motor and camera system. Even in the grainy night vision, I could tell who it was. The squat frame, the stiff posture, the cropped hair reflecting faint light. Karen D'Angelo, in the goddamn middle of my property, with a bolt cutter in hand. I didn't hesitate. I tapped the emergency override on my system app. The yard exploded into full illumination. Motion lights, driveway floods, infrared strobes. Karen froze like a deer in the wrong horror movie. The camera zoomed automatically as she stumbled back. Her face lit up like a mugshot. Then I hit the speaker. "This is private property," I said through the exterior PA system. My voice echoed through the night, booming across the open gravel. "Step away from the equipment and remain where you are. Law enforcement is en route. Any movement will be recorded and used in prosecution," Karen shrieked. Actually shrieked. She dropped the bolt cutter and bolted, not toward the gate, but into the brush at the side of the property line, trying to crawl under a stack of firewood I hadn't moved yet. It would have been funny if I weren't already on the phone with dispatch. "This is Logan Carroll," I told the 911 operator. "Private property intrusion in progress. I have clear visual, live video feed. Suspect is concealed under debris on the east perimeter. No weapons visible. I'm remaining inside." The operator was calm, professional, said a unit was nearby and already en route. I stayed exactly where I was, right behind the bulletproof glass of my living room window, and watched the feed as Karen tried to wedge herself deeper into a corner of my own yard like a feral possum. 3 minutes later, headlights swung across the trees. A deputy cruiser pulled up to the gate. I buzzed them in remotely and spoke through the speaker again. "She's hiding behind the log stack near the east camera, moving slowly. Watch your step. She's got tools." The deputies didn't waste time. They flanked, flashlights up, and within seconds I heard the barked commands. "Hands where we can see them." I dropped something. I was walking my dog. "You don't have a dog, ma'am." I was inspecting a safety concern. In the dark. With bolt cutters? They pulled her up and walked her back to the cruiser, hands cuffed behind her back, as she sputtered about visual cohesion and neighborhood value. I stepped outside only once the deputies confirmed the scene was secure. One of them nodded at me. "You got the footage?" "3 angles," I said. "Night vision, high-res audio, and 1 clip where she looks straight into the lens like she's auditioning for America's Dumbest Criminals." "Mind if we get a copy?" "Already uploaded to your evidence portal," I said, handing over a printed incident. "Log and USB backup just for good measure." Karen was now sitting in the cruiser, muttering to herself and kicking the backseat floor like a toddler denied candy. She still didn't seem to understand what she'd done wrong. "She'll be booked on trespassing, attempted vandalism, and probably possession of burglary tools," one officer told me. "It'll be up to the county if they press additional charges." "She's the HOA president," I said flatly. "You think she'll try to spin this into some community safety mission?" The deputy shrugged. "Let her try. This isn't HOA business. This is felony territory." I thanked them as they drove off, Karen's silhouette still visible through the back window, eyes wide and unblinking like she'd just seen a ghost. Or her future. I spent the next hour checking the junctions. She hadn't managed to fully cut the main cable, but she'd sliced into the casing deep enough that I'd need to rewire the housing. $200 in damage, maybe more, but nothing I couldn't fix. What stuck with me wasn't the damage. It was the audacity. She'd come onto private land with tools in the middle of the night and genuinely thought the rules didn't apply. And now, finally, someone else had seen it too. Karen made bail by the next afternoon. I knew it because one of her HOA lieutenants, a wiry man in a golf cart with a clipboard and an expression like he hadn't passed a bowel movement since the Bush administration, rolled up to the edge of my property, took a photo of my gate, and peeled. Off without a word. The camera caught him clearly. He didn't even try to hide it. Then came the letter. A pristine, tri-folded envelope slipped under my gate like a cat turd wrapped in satin. This one was on official Aspen Hollow HOA letterhead and opened with, "You are hereby fined $10,000 per day, effective immediately for causing significant visual disruption to the aesthetic continuity of the Aspen Hollow community. 10 grand per day." I read it twice just to be sure I hadn't slipped into a coma and dreamed up a Monty Python sketch. I walked back to my office, scanned the whole damn thing, and attached it to a fresh folder labeled Legal Nuclear Response. They'd poked the bear. Now they'd get the claws. First stop, my lawyer, Brad Wexler, wasn't just a contracts guy. He was a former assistant district attorney who'd gotten bored with public service and opened his own boutique firm for people who didn't like being screwed with. He took one look at the fine letter, another look at the video of Karen crawling through my yard like a burglarized raccoon, and grinned. "They're not just poking you, Logan. They're running a full-contact stupidity marathon." Brad drafted the filings that same afternoon. 3 separate actions. 1. A civil suit for defamation and harassment, based on the false 911 call and HOA-wide emails that claimed I was unstable and a danger to the neighborhood. 2. A criminal complaint against Karen personally for attempted vandalism, trespassing, and unlawful surveillance interference. 3. A cease and desist letter to the entire HOA board demanding they retract the $10,000 a day fine and issue a formal apology for overreach and fraud. But that wasn't all. I sent out my own email, not to the HOA board, to the actual residents of Aspen Hollow. After all, they were neighbors. Misguided maybe, but not the enemy. Not yet. I attached the full security footage from the night Karen broke in. No narration, no commentary. Just timestamps, clean video, and a simple subject line. This is what your HOA president did last night. Within an hour, my inbox exploded. Half the replies were furious, but not at me. They were outraged at her. Apparently, Karen had told the board and neighborhood Facebook group that she'd been confronted violently during a routine inspection of a public utility line. One guy even emailed me screenshots of her post claiming I screamed threats at her and sicked my attack dogs on her. I don't even have dogs. That evening, HOA drama hit critical mass. An emergency meeting was called at the Aspen Hollow Community Clubhouse. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need to be. I got live play-by-play from 2 different neighbors who thought the whole thing was insane and wanted to give me the rundown. Apparently, Karen opened with a speech about restoring order and enforcing community standards before launching into a PowerPoint presentation labeled The Fence Menace, Visual Pollution, and Security Threats in Aspen Hollow. She didn't even make it past slide 4. Someone stood up and shouted, "We saw the video, Karen. You were hiding in his bushes like a crazy person." Another yelled, "My kids walked past that trail. What if he hadn't had cameras? What if the police thought it was real?" The room turned on her fast. A vote of no confidence was demanded. Arguments broke out. Someone reportedly spilled lemonade on the projector and called her a dictator in linen. By the next morning, my lawyer confirmed half the board had resigned, the fine was rescinded as unauthorized, and Karen's status as president was being reevaluated pending further review. I wasn't done. Brad filed the lawsuits formally with the county court, complete with affidavits from 2 deputies who responded the night of the trespassing. My neighbor Carl, retired Air Force and HOA member by proximity, submitted a sworn statement that Karen had lied in multiple meetings about my property status. Even the county zoning office sent me a letter of support, affirming that I had full legal rights to my fence and that no external body had authority over my land. And then, cherry on top, the judge assigned to our case set a preliminary hearing within the month, citing public interest. Things were moving fast now, too fast for Karen to stop them. And for once, the law was riding shotgun. The courthouse in Ada County was just dreary enough to match the weather. Gray walls, gray carpet, gray fluorescent lighting that made everyone look like they hadn't slept in a week. I showed up early, in jeans and a dark button-down. Not tactical gear, not a suit, just something clean and civilian. Karen, on the other hand, walked in like she was still president of something. Ivory blouse, navy blazer, pearls. She even brought a rolling binder cart like she was auditioning for a reboot of Law & Order, HOA division. Brad leaned over and muttered, "Do you think she alphabetized her delusions?" We were first on the docket. The clerk called the matter, Carol V. D'Angelo et al. Karen was named both individually and as the head of the HOA board at the time of the incident. The judge, a middle-aged woman with the dry patience of someone who'd seen every flavor of idiocy on the menu, gave both sides 5 minutes for opening statements. Brad kept it simple. He outlined the sequence of events: the false 911 call, the physical intrusion onto private property, the damage to my gate system, the unauthorized fines, and the smear campaign on social media and HOA mailing lists. He passed up exhibits like a magician dealing out aces, video screenshots, sworn statements, zoning permits, the HOA's own bylaws. Then came Karen's turn. She stood with practiced posture, voice trembling just enough to fake sincerity. "Your Honor, I only ever acted out of concern for our community. Mr. Carroll's property, while technically outside our jurisdiction, visually impacts Aspen Hollow. His behavior has been intimidating. Armed cameras barking at residents. An impenetrable fence that's completely out of line with neighborhood values. I feared for safety." Brad stood before she could finish. "Objection, irrelevant emotional appeal." "Sustained," said the judge. "Stick to factual matters, Ms. D'Angelo." Karen flushed, but continued, now with more venom. She claimed I had threatened her with floodlights and amplified verbal aggression, and that I had covertly installed surveillance targeting HOA common areas. Brad calmly walked to the evidence screen and played the raw footage. It showed Karen snipping cable housing in the dark, lit up like Times Square when my security system kicked on. Her expression when the loudspeaker barked was pure deer in headlights. Karen shrank visibly in her chair. The courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward. "Is this accurate footage, Ms. D'Angelo?" Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then settled on, I was investigating a safety hazard, alone, at night, because I believed." "You believed you had the right to trespass with burglary tools?" the judge asked flatly. Karen tried to pivot, claimed the HOA had precedent for inspecting adjacent properties. That's when Brad struck again. He produced county zoning maps and historic parcel data showing definitively that my land had never been included under any HOA expansion or annexation. Not now, not ever. Then came the financials. Brad showed that Karen had authorized the $10,000 fine without full board consent, had forged signatures on 2 internal memos, and sent formal notices to residents misrepresenting HOA authority. It was a legal wrecking ball. The judge recessed for 15 minutes, and when we returned, the verdict was blunt. Karen was sentenced to 6 months probation, 100 hours of court-assigned community service, and a $25,000 civil fine to be paid directly to me for property damage, defamation, and harassment. The court found she'd repeatedly and maliciously misused authority under false pretenses. The HOA's attempted fine was voided as illegitimate and unenforceable. Even better, the court ordered an external audit of the Aspen Hollow HOA board and management policies. Karen didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, hands clenched, eyes twitching, lips pressed so tight you could have used them to seal concrete. As we walked out, one of the younger deputies who'd responded to the original call caught me by the parking lot. "You know," he said, "I don't usually root for civilians in these property spats, but that was textbook." I nodded. "HOAs don't scare me. I've faced worse." "Yeah," he said with a grin, "but I bet worse didn't write their own fines on Word templates." Brad and I drove straight to the zoning office afterward. We filed 2 things, a formal request to bar Aspen Hollow from any future petition to annex my property, and a permanent no trespass order against Karen D'Angelo, signed, sealed, and archived. She wasn't setting foot on my land again, not unless she wanted to test the difference between floodlight warning and felony charge number 2. HOA meetings were never my idea of fun, but watching one implode from the outside, that was borderline entertainment. After the verdict, Aspen Hollow went into meltdown. Karen's probation order spread like wildfire. Someone posted the court transcript in a community Facebook group, and within hours, half the residents were demanding a full board audit, while the other half argued over whether visual harmony was a real legal concept. I didn't interfere. I didn't need to. But the fallout landed in my inbox anyway. Emails poured in from residents I'd never met, apologies, shock, even a couple offers to buy me lunch for putting her in her place. One guy, a retired fire chief, said he'd felt pressured for years to keep his old Dodge pickup hidden behind a curtain of fake shrubs because Karen thought it ruined the curb feel. He thanked me for liberating the block. As for Karen, she was no longer listed as president. The HOA's new interim manager was a real estate compliance consultant named April Lynn, professional, young, Clippard efficient, and most importantly, not insane. She requested a formal meeting with me to reset community relations. I agreed, publicly and on my own terms. We met at the edge of my driveway, on neutral ground. April was polite and precise. She apologized on behalf of the board, promised that no further correspondence would come from Aspen Hollow unless it was legally required, and assured me that Karen's prior directives had been nullified and struck from the HOA's internal policy log. "I also want to clarify," she added, "we have no jurisdiction over your parcel. None. Zero. It's not under any annexation, overlay zone, or visual covenant." "Glad someone finally read the damn map," I said, shaking her hand. But I didn't stop there. That weekend, I made some upgrades. New motion sensors along the tree line, extended battery backups, reinforced the gate housing with tamper-proof casing, and then, just above the keypad entry, I mounted a fresh metal sign. It read, "Private property. Trespassers will be illuminated, recorded, and prosecuted. Zoning arguments will be laughed at. It got a chuckle from the UPS guy. Then came the HOA newsletter. I didn't subscribe to it, obviously, but one of my newer allies in Aspen Hollow forwarded me the PDF. Page 1 was a note from April, complete with bold type and no-nonsense tone. Reminder: false emergency calls are a crime under Idaho Code, Paragraph 18705. Please report only legitimate threats to emergency services. Personal grievances do not qualify. Subtle? No. Effective? Absolutely. 2 days later, I saw something remarkable. 2 new fences going up in Aspen Hollow. One was aluminum, 4 feet high, with a small sign declaring pet zone. The other was chain link, halfway through installation at the back of someone's lot facing the trail that bordered my land. Apparently, Karen had done more than overstep. She'd inspired people to realize how little power the HOA actually had. Funny how sunlight and lawsuits both disinfect things. I poured myself a glass of rye that night and stood by the front gate, watching the cameras hum gently and the perimeter lights cycle through their test pattern. The land was quiet again. Untouched. Mine. I wasn't planning to teach a seminar or write a blog, but the thought stayed in my head. Maybe folks needed to know how to protect their homes without turning into vigilantes or victims. The right to your land? It's only as strong as your spine. About a month later, I got a letter from the county. Not a warning, not a summons, just a plain envelope with a small return address from the Zoning Commission. Inside was a notice confirming that my petition to permanently bar annexation by Aspen Hollow had been approved. The language was crisp. Parcel or R5677092133 orange shall remain exempt from HOA jurisdiction and is recognized as sovereign residential property with no existing or pending community covenants. I framed that one. But just when I thought the last loose end was tied up, Karen made one last move. It came by certified mail, as if dressing it up in bureaucracy would give it credibility. The envelope was bulky, legal-sized, and smelled faintly like cheap perfume and desperation. Inside, a formal grievance filed against me in small claims court. The accusation that I had emotionally damaged the community by erecting a fence that created a psychological atmosphere of hostility. No joke. She cited fence-induced anxiety and visual trauma. I nearly choked on my coffee. Brad read it in silence, then calmly said, "I've seen meth heads argue their dog is the reincarnation of Teddy Roosevelt with more legal merit than this. We decided not to ignore it. Instead, we used it. We filed a motion to dismiss, of course, but we also filed a supplemental complaint attaching her new grievance as evidence of continued harassment. It was brilliant. Karen had unknowingly handed us proof that she still hadn't learned a damn thing." Meanwhile, my footage of her bolt cutter escapade started circulating in a local homeowner rights forum. No one knew who uploaded it. I sure didn't stop them. The comments were brutal. HOA president by day, splinter cell by night. Don't mess with the gate guy. This is why I live in the woods. Within a week, I got word from one of the HOA board's remaining members. Karen had officially resigned from all positions, effective immediately. The resignation letter, leaked by someone with a sense of humor, included a line that read, "I was only ever trying to do what's best for the community." Unfortunately, the community disagrees. No kidding. The final court date rolled around for the nuisance complaint. Brad didn't even let me attend, said it was beneath my time. The judge threw it out in under 10 minutes, citing frivolous abuse of judicial resources. Karen didn't even show. That should have been the end. But I felt something still hung in the air. The idea that other people might be dealing with the same insanity. Bad faith HOA actors, faux legal harassment, fake fines written in Times New Roman. So I called the local library. I told them I'd like to run a free workshop, basic residential security and legal awareness for homeowners. I expected a handful of folks, maybe some veterans, maybe a guy who didn't like how the mailman parked. We got a full room, every seat filled. More standing in the back. I brought slides, diagrams, even a sample sign that read, "No trespassing, this means you, HOA." Got a laugh. But the questions were serious. People wanted to know how to file easement complaints when they could legally record what to do if their HOA president started behaving like a cartoon villain with a clipboard. After the seminar, one woman came up and shook my hand with tears in her eyes, said her HOA tried to tow her car because it looked too industrial. Another guy asked me if I could install a camera system on his farm. I said yes. And then I went home. Back to my 5 acres of peace. Back to my gates, my signs, my dogs. Yes, I adopted 2, named them Bolt and Circuit. And the land that was mine, not someone's ornamental spreadsheet. Let them keep their white picket fences. I'll keep my steel. 1 year later to the day, I stood at the edge of my property sipping coffee and watching the morning fog roll through the junipers. The air smelled like rain-soaked earth and sagebrush. Clean, quiet, undisturbed. The new gate system ran smooth as butter, powered by a dedicated solar backup and enough shielding to survive a minor lightning strike. Bolt and Circuit roamed the yard like retired security guards, lazy in their patrols but loud enough to scare off door-to-door salesmen. A delivery van pulled up. The driver stepped out, glanced at the sign on the fence, private property, no HOA zones beyond this point, and gave me a thumbs up. "Wish I had one of those where I live," he said, handing me a package. "You got a fence?" "Nope." Karen, I didn't even ask for details, just nodded in sympathy and wished him luck. Back inside, I passed the framed county certificate on the wall and sat down at my desk. I was halfway through preparing next month's seminar materials. Attendance had grown. Now it wasn't just locals, but folks from other towns. Even a couple from Nevada had driven out to learn how to legally fight back against HOA overreach. I'd been invited to speak at 2 city council workshops and 1 sheriff's department training on property disputes. Apparently, the footage of Karen's nocturnal bolt cutter adventure had become part of an unofficial training series on how not to engage with private security systems. Somewhere out there, she was probably sulking in a condo where the biggest concern was whether her neighbor's succulents matched the hallway carpet. I didn't care. She was someone else's headache now, likely without keys, without power, and definitely without a platform. I hadn't seen her since the day the judge handed down that sentence, and I liked it that way. The HOA? Still standing. Barely. April Lynn had turned the place around with quiet efficiency, stripped back the nonsense policies, and established a rule: no correspondence without legal basis. They didn't bother me. I didn't bother them. Peace through perimeter. Later that day, I went out to replace a trail camera that had shorted out. As I tightened the mount to the cedar post, I caught a flash of white beyond the trees, someone jogging the trail on the Aspen Hollow side. A woman I didn't recognize slowed near the edge of my property, paused when she saw the sign, and gave a little wave. I waved back. She didn't approach the fence, didn't say anything, but she respected the line. That's all I'd ever wanted. The freedom to draw a boundary and know it would hold, not because I had guns or cameras or lawyers, though those helped, but because eventually even the loudest HOA tyrants, the clipboard crusaders, and self-appointed aesthetic sheriffs learn the truth. You don't get to tell other people how to live just because you bought a house with matching shutters. I turned, whistled for the dogs, and walked back to the house, past the gates under the arch across the gravel drive, home.